Hi, this is Professor Grabowski, and this video lecture will explain your next assignment, which is the persuasive speeches. Now, there are different formats for giving persuasive speeches, but the one that we're going to use for our class is what I call the 2-minute argument format. So the first thing you want to do, if you haven't done this already, is to read the instructions for this assignment, which are available online at cubreporters.org/persuasive_speech. You can see the URL there on the screen. Now it's important to note that for this assignment you will actually be giving two persuasive speeches. You'll be giving two separate speeches on two separate days. The first thing you want to do is select your topic or issue that you're going to speak about. You should have already done this. If you haven't selected a topic, email me immediately. The next thing you want to do is begin your research on your topic, and you're just going to research the topic in general because you're going to be looking for information that is both for it and against it. Because when you give your speeches, you're going to first argue in favor of your issue, and then on a separate day you will argue against your issue. So for example, if your topic is bicycle helmets should be mandatory, on the first day of our speeches you're going to argue in favor of that proposition. So you're going to argue that yes, bicycle helmets should be mandatory and these are the reasons why. On the next day you are going to give another speech, a 2-minute speech against that proposition. So after you argue in favor of your topic on the first day, on the second day you're going to come in and argue the exact opposite. So on the second day, if your topic was bicycle helmets should be mandatory, you would argue bicycle helmets should not be mandatory and these are the reasons why. So these are two separate speeches you're giving on separate days. The first day you're going to argue for your proposition. That will be a 2-minute speech. You'll need to hand in an outline for that, and then on the second day you're going to argue against your proposition. So you're going to argue the complete opposite viewpoint, and you will also need to hand in an outline for that as well. And just so you're forewarned, I usually videotape the first speech and post it online to a Facebook group that I created and you should sign up for, and this way you can see what you look like actually speaking. And what I'll have you do is not only critique yourself, but critique other students in the class as well by posting comments underneath their videos. I'll assign a few students to get together in a group and critique one another on their speeches. Now, you may think this is kind of silly. You know, why do you have to argue both the pro and con side of the same issue? You might think this is stupid. You know, I only agree with the pro side. I don't want to have to argue the con side. For example, if you selected as your topic that fur should not be used in fashion, you may be a big animal lover and you may think that it's morally wrong to use fur in fashion. So, you know, you may be like, how am I going to give a speech on that? I don't agree with that position. Well, the reason we do that, or I have you argue both a pro and con side of an issue, is because it's an important skill to develop, not only for this class but also for life. After we complete these persuasive speeches, we will do our debates, and you will debate someone in the class on a topic. And in order for you to effectively debate them and refute their points, you're going to have to understand where they're coming from. You're going to have to anticipate their arguments. So this is going to prepare you for that, you know, having to research both the pro and con sides of an issue. More importantly, this is going to help you later in life when you get out into the real world, especially if you work in communications, because chances are that at some point in the future, you know, you're going to have to work with a client or speak on an issue that you may not personally agree with. For example, if you go into journalism, journalists are supposed to be objective. So if you are covering a controversial issue or a political debate, you may personally support one candidate over the other. In the past presidential election, you may have been leaning more towards Obama than McCain, but if you're covering that debate, you need to do so objectively, and you need to make sure that you represent both sides fairly and that your article isn't biased. If you work in public relations, you may have some big corporate client that's involved in a scandal come to your PR firm and ask for help with cleaning up its image with crisis communications. And you may abhor what they did. Perhaps you're working with Exxon Valdez and they just spilled millions of gallons of oil into the Alaskan Arctic. But if your boss tells you, hey, you've got to go and write up a press release about this and help them out, then you're going to have to do it. If you decide to go into law and become a lawyer, perhaps you're interested in practicing media law or First Amendment law. Well, for every journalist that you represent in a case to protect his right to shield his sources or to get access to open records, you may also have to represent on another day, someone from the Ku Klux Klan who is fighting for their right to use hate speech. Both issues, both reporter's privilege and hate speech, both fall under the First Amendment. And if you go and work for the American Civil Liberties Union, for example, they represent diverse clients like that all the time. And you don't necessarily have to agree with the Ku Klux Klan stance. What you're doing is upholding the Constitution. You're fighting for the First Amendment. So being able to take a step back, to look at issues objectively, to play devil's advocate is very important, both in this class and in life. And the reality is that the reason we have controversies, that we have these issues that we debate, is because there are good arguments to be made on both sides. So it's important that you get over any hang-ups you might argue or that you might have about having to argue one side of your issue. No one's going to hold it against you if you argue that, fur should be allowed in fashion. We're not going to be sitting there at the back of class and gasping and be like, oh my God, how could you hurt Bambi like that? We understand that's part of this assignment, and you're just doing your job. So now let's talk about the format for these speeches. Like I said, there are different ways to do persuasive speeches, but for this class, we'll be following what's known as the 2-minute argument format. They use this in a lot of other public speaking classes, and I think it's really an effective way to make a compelling argument and to do so succinctly in a short amount of time. And that's really a big challenge of the speech, is saying everything you need to say and persuading the audience in only 2 minutes. Remember that if you go significantly over the time limit, and by significantly over I mean more than 10 seconds, I will deduct points. On the other hand, if you're significantly under, you'll probably lose points too, because you probably won't be able to say everything you need to say and be persuasive in less than a minute 50. So if your speech is only a minute long, you're probably going to be leaving out some important information. So you want to shoot for that 150 to 2 minute range for your speech. Being able to speak in a short amount of time and to say a lot is a skill that's important to have later in life. People have very short attention spans, so you need to get to your point and get to your point quickly. So you're going to begin your speech as you did your informative speech with an introduction, and in the introduction there should be a catchy attention getter to get the audience's attention and to convey to them why this issue is significant. So if your topic is mandatory bicycle helmets, for example, you might begin with a startling statement, something like, last year 5,000 people, 5,000 bicyclists were treated in the emergency room for concussions, and all of these injuries could have been prevented if these bicyclists had just worn helmets. Then you want to state your claim, so that's the side of the issue you're arguing for. So if you're doing mandatory bicycle helmets and you're arguing the pro side, you want to say, ladies and gentlemen, I propose that bicycle helmets should be mandatory for every bicycle rider. At this point also, you want to define your terms. A lot of the issues and propositions you'll be arguing need to be clarified. For example, if you're arguing that the drinking age should be lowered, you need to say what it should be lowered to. Should it be lowered to 20? Should it be lowered to 18? Should it be lowered to 16? Should it be lowered to 13? You need to define what the age limit would be. If you're arguing that physician-assisted suicide should be legalized, you need to explain what physician-assisted suicide is, because a lot of people get it confused or assume it's the same thing as euthanasia. They're two different things. So you really need to think about your topic and ask yourself, does this need to be clarified or defined? And if your topic needs to be clarified or defined further, make sure you do it, because if you don't, if there's any confusion about what exactly you stand for, I will deduct points. So if you have any questions about your topic and whether it needs to be clarified or defined further, feel free to ask me. So after you state your claim and define your terms, you will preview the reasons why your claim should be supported. Now this is really important. A lot of students forget to preview the reasons. They just jump right into the reasons. Before you jump into the details about your reasons, you want to preview them. So if your topic is bicycle helmets, you might say, well, there are three main reasons why bicycle helmets should be mandatory that I'm going to talk about today. First, they help prevent head injuries. Second, they will reduce healthcare costs in our country. And finally, they will free up or reduce the load on overcrowded emergency rooms. Then after you preview the reasons, you're going to go into detail about each reason specifically. So after you preview the reasons, you're going to go into detail. So first, bicycle helmets will reduce head injuries. And then you're going to talk a little bit about that. You're going to explain how specifically bicycle helmets will reduce head injuries. You're going to back it up with evidence, things like statistics or quotes from experts. And then you're going to move on to your next point. And you'll do the same with that. You'll go into detail about that. You'll add evidence to support it. Remember to cite your sources in your speech, not only in your outline, but in your speech. Then you'll move on to your third point. Do the same thing there. Make your point, explain it, back it up with evidence, cite your sources. And then after that, you want to start to move on to your summary and conclusion. You really don't want to have more than three main points because you only have 2 minutes to speak. So if you have more than that, you're not going to be able to go into too much detail about each point, or you're going to run the risk of running over the time limit. So just pick three main points. All right, if you have less than three main points, it's probably not going to be a strong enough argument. If you have more than 3 points, you're probably going to go over the time limit. So pick three main points. Go into details about each point. Then after that, you want to summarize your argument, restate your claim, and conclude with a final statement. So that's the way the 2-minute argument format works. Got the introductory statement with the catchy beginning, the statement of claim. You're going to preview your reasons. Then you're going to present each reason in detail. Make sure you cite evidence. Then you're going to summarize your case. And finally, you're going to restate your claim and conclude with your closing statement. And it's important that you follow this format. If you deviate at all from it, you will lose points. And the reason why I'm kind of anal about you following this format is because it's been shown to be an effective format when you follow it in its entirety, and also because I need some sort of objective, uniform standard or format to compare you all by. So make sure that you follow the format and do all of these steps listed on your screen. So let's go over the components of your speech. in detail. Remember that every speech, including your persuasive speech, has three parts basically. You've got the introduction, you've got the body of the speech, and you've got your conclusion. For this speech, you want to use the introduction to grab the audience's attention. Use something catchy, a startling statement, or a significant fact, or something that's going to illustrate your point and get the audience interested in your topic. And then you want to reveal your topic, state your claim, and then preview the main points of your speech. I would recommend spending no more than 30 seconds on your introduction. The body of your speech is the meat of your speech. It's where you want to spend the most amount of your time. So for this speech, I recommend spending between a minute and a minute 15 seconds on the body of your speech. That's not a whole lot of time. So like I said, just stick with three main points or three main reasons why the audience should agree with your claim. So for example, if you are arguing the topic of mandatory military service, that is that military service should be required. And incidentally, this is a topic that you would need to define or explain better in your introduction. So you'd want to say something like, military service should be required for all Americans, for 1 year when they turn 18. Anyway, if that was your topic, let's say you're arguing against the topic, so you're arguing the con side. One of your reasons might be that military service shouldn't be mandatory is that most Americans oppose military service. Since this is a democracy, we should do what the majority wants. Now keep in mind that's a reason, but it's basically just an opinion. All right, it can't stand on its own, otherwise it's not going to be very compelling. You need to back it up with evidence. So immediately after saying that, you might say something like, a 2007 survey by Gallup found that 72% of Americans are opposed to mandatory military service. So remember, in your speech, when you give your reasons, not only do you want to give your reasons, but you need to also back them up with evidence, and you need to cite the source of your evidence. Because if you don't cite the source of your evidence, first of all, it hurts your credibility because your audience is wondering, well, how do you know that? Where's that information from? And secondly, it's technically plagiarism if you try to pass off other people's information as your own without giving them due credit. So make sure that you use evidence such as statistics, examples, illustrations, expert opinions, and that you cite it not only in your outline but in your speech, or you will lose points. Two things you need to realize about giving a reason or making a sub-argument in your speech. The first is that there are good arguments and then there are bad arguments. So a good argument is backed up by evidence, and that evidence has to justify the argument that you're making. So for example, if you're talking about banning hunting, and you make the argument that killing animals for sport is amounts to animal cruelty, okay, say that's your reason. Well, if you back it up by saying, I'm sure we all remember the scene from the movie Bambi where the hunter kills the deer and they're all sad, and everyone in the theater cried. That's not a really effective argument. You're citing a movie and an animated movie at that, not a real life situation. On the other hand, if you say that killing animals is cruel, studies find that animals experience pain in the same ways that humans do, and they also experience loss and can be depressed when one of their relatives dies or something like that. According to a study by researchers at Stanford University in 2005. Well, that would be good evidence to back up your claim. So make sure that you use good evidence to back up your claims. The second point I want to point out about making arguments or giving your reasons is that some reasons are better than others. I had a student last year who was arguing that the death penalty should be prohibited or banned or abandoned in this country, but she neglected to mention as one of her reasons the fact that innocent people have been killed, as a result of the death penalty. I think that's a really compelling reason. I think that's as compelling as any reason out there. So you definitely would want to include a reason like that in your speech. I mean, keep in mind with your topics, there are probably an abundance of reasons why someone would be on the pro side or why someone would be on the con side of this issue. You only have a limited amount of time, so you can only select 3 good reasons. You want to select the 3 best reasons. You don't want to simply select the 3 first reasons you come across when you're researching. You want to come up with 3 really compelling reasons why people should support your claim. And as I mentioned, there are better reasons than others. Try to find the strongest reasons and use them in your arguments. So after you get through your introduction and the body of your speech, you're not going to have much time left, perhaps 15 to 25 seconds. You want to wrap up your speech. You want to summarize your main points, restate your claim, and if possible, have a dramatic or creative ending, a kicker to leave the audience with to really drive home your argument and why the audience should support your side. And remember, you're not only being judged on the speech itself, on how well written your speech is and how strong your arguments are, and do you cite your sources and things like that. As always, you're being judged on the verbal components of your speech. Remember, this is a public presentation class, so presentation weighs significantly into the grade, so I will be assessing you on things like volume, pitch, rate, articulation, pronunciation, as well as nonverbal components. Eye contact, really important. This is where students lose a lot of points. Remember, this is only a 2-minute speech, so if you are reading extensively off of note cards, I will deduct a lot of points. You won't be able to get above a C+ if you don't make good sustained eye contact. You should only be occasionally glancing at your note cards to refresh your memory, so just jot down your main points on note cards. This way you'll be looking up most of the time and speaking extemporaneously to the audience. Only look down to refresh your memory, or if you have a statistic or quotation that you need to write to get correct. And of course, other nonverbal components matter as well and can make your speech more effective or less effective depending on how well you do it. So things like posture, be careful because some of you have a tendency to sway back and forth when you're speaking. Some of you also will keep your hands in your pockets, so avoid that. You want to use gestures, but don't overdo it with the gestures. And you also want to make sure that your facial expressions complement, what you're saying. So if you're trying to be angry about something, you want to look angry. You don't want to be up there laughing if you're giving a speech on a serious topic. So at this point, you may be wondering what this all looks like when you put it together. What's the finished speech like? Well, here's an example. Let's say that your topic is a mentor program. So first you're going to argue that we should have mentor programs in the workforce, and then on another day you'll argue against mentor programs, that they're a waste of time. All right, so let's say now I'm giving my speech on the mentor program, the pro side of the argument. I might begin with something like this. Do you remember your first job? Awkwardness, anxiousness, nervousness. These are just a few of the adjectives used to describe the first day of a new job. Most of us can recall a day when we were the new man on the totem pole, or new woman. It can be quite overwhelming, but having a mentor to turn to can eliminate all of the fears. I propose that all businesses should incorporate a mentor program into their organization. And the reasons for this are that having a mentor will increase productivity, it will boost employee morale, and it will improve customer relations. And at this point, if I was giving this speech, I'd probably also want to define what I meant exactly by a mentor. Remember, you need to for a lot of these speeches, a lot of these topics, you need to define your terms. Don't spend a whole lot of time doing it, but just briefly clarify it if it needs to be clarified. Reason number 1, productivity will improve with better training. New employees properly trained by an experienced person will help and guide them and answer questions. Also, with proper training, employees stay at a job longer. Studies show that lack of training is the number one reason that employees quit their jobs. According to John Doe, president of Microsoft, quote, companies are 55% more profitable when associates are trained properly, employees do a better job, and as a result, productivity increases, end quote. Reason number 2, having a mentor program will boost employee morale. Mentors take the new person under their wing. They show new associates that they're valued and important. They help acclimate the new people to their surroundings. Mentors also teach employees the culture and the climate of the organization. Jane Smith, a new cashier at ShopRite, says, quote, I loved having a mentor. She helped me so much during my first few weeks. I really felt like a valued part of the team, end quote. The third reason that having a mentor program is good is that it improves customer relations. With better training, there's less turnover, and that leads to happy employees. When employees are happy, they work better and care about their job, and they treat customers better as a result. Customers see that, and they continue using your products and services. According to a Wall Street Journal article in January 2009, quote, the best companies are those that keep their customers happy and satisfied. Good business is all about good customer service, end quote. As you can see, having a mentor has many benefits for the employee and the company as a whole. Increased productivity, better employee morale, and improved customer service standards are just a few of the many good things that come from mentor programs. So make your employees feel welcome, help train them properly, give them the tools they need to succeed professionally and personally, give them a mentor. So that's an example of how a 2-minute speech might go. You can also see a few examples from previous students that I've posted online. If you go to http cubreporters.org/persuasive_examples, so the URL up on the screen, if you go there, you will see I posted 3 videos of 2-minute arguments or persuasive speeches. You'll also want to read the critiques I've written next to the videos, and that will give you an idea of what I'm looking for when you give these speeches, and what to do and what not to do. Okay, now let's talk briefly about grading and how you'll be graded for this speech. Since you've already have a couple speeches under your belt now, I will be grading tougher for this speech than I did in the past because you've had some practice. I expect you to be getting better with each speech, so I expect more of you for this speech. These are the different elements that will all factor into your final grade for this speech. Your introduction, remember you want to have that catchy beginning. Statement of claim, make sure that you actually state your proposition. I propose we do this, or I propose we shouldn't do this, or we should do that, or we shouldn't do that. A lot of students forget to do that, and they lose points. Make sure before you actually jump into the reasons why we should support your claim that you first preview them briefly. A lot of students also forget to do this, and they lose points. Then you want to, after you preview your reasons, go into details about your reasons. Remember to use signposts like first, or my first reason is, or second, or secondly, or my second reason why we should have a mentor program is this. Also remember that you need to support your reasons with evidence. You can't just give a reason, you need to back it up with evidence, things like statistics or expert opinions. And you need to cite those sources. A lot of people forget to cite their sources. If you don't cite where your information is from, I will deduct points. A lot of students forget to do that. Don't make that mistake. Remember, at the end of your speech, you want to summarize your argument. and then you want to restate your claim and conclude. So don't just end abruptly after you give your 3 reasons. Make sure that you summarize and properly conclude. And as I mentioned, you also will be graded on delivery, things like eye contact, really important. Make sure you practice your speech a lot, vocal emphasis, and just overall confidence. And as with your other speeches and your remaining speeches, you need to hand in an outline, type it up, and be sure to include a works cited and list your sources in APA or MLA or some proper academic citation format. So if you just hand me an outline and it doesn't have a works cited, I will deduct points. If you just hand me an outline and it just lists URLs, web addresses, but it tells me nothing about the site, then I'm also going to deduct points. So make sure that you follow those directions. Now, in the past, I've identified some areas where students commonly make mistakes or they forget to do things, and as a result they lose points, and here they are. A lot of students lose points because they don't obey the time limit. They're either significantly under or significantly over. Remember, the time limit's 2 minutes, so your speech should be somewhere between 1 minute and 45 seconds and 2 minutes and 10 seconds. I'll give you a 10-second grace period, but that's it. A lot of students also have lost points because they either didn't cite their sources in their outline or in their speech, or they didn't cite credible sources. And if you have any question about whether your source is credible, email me, okay, or watch the video that I posted about researching for speeches, because ignorance is not a defense. If I say after you give your speech, hey, that wasn't a good source, and you say, oh, I thought it was, well, you should have emailed me and asked me. So if you have any doubt about whether your sources are credible, ask me, email me. Magazines, newspapers, journals, books, those, if you use those, then you're fine, but you have to be careful when you start to use websites, because a lot of websites aren't good sources. And just because a website has a .org at the end of it doesn't mean it's necessarily a good source. Anyone can go and register for a .org domain name. So be careful with websites like procon.org and balancepolitics.org. They might not be good sources. And of course, don't use wikipedia.org. That's not a valid source. Students in the past have also lost points because they failed to hand in an outline. A lot of students struggle with making good eye contact. That's really important. Like I said, if you don't make good eye contact, it won't be possible to get above a C+ for this speech. It's only a 2-minute speech, so there's no reason you shouldn't be able to practice your speech and really get it down well and not have to rely heavily on note cards. That's why I'll take off significant points if you don't make good eye contact. Making good eye contact is really important in public speaking. Another area where students lose points is they don't make good arguments or the best arguments. They fail to preview their reasons. They don't state their claim, or they use lots of fillers. Things like like, you want to make sure that you avoid those. So even though this is only a 2-minute speech, as you can see, there's a lot of work that you got to put into this. You want to go and do good research, and you want to spend a lot of time practicing your speech. So that concludes this video lecture. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to email me at mark.grabowski@marist.edu. Once again, that's mark.grabowski@marist.edu, and make sure you email me directly and not through iLearn, because I don't always receive messages that are sent through iLearn. So make sure you email me directly at mark.grabowski@marist.edu.